Wyoming Territory, 1879. The wind that cut across the high plains near Rawlins carried grit sharp enough to sting, but it was nothing compared to the words that had chased Kallie Vaughn from her family's ranch 2 days before. Too much weight for a Vaughn girl, her father had said flatly, not even meeting her eyes. You bring shame to your mother's memory. She had stood silent, fists clenched around the skirts of her brown calico dress, her heart roaring in her chest. When her younger brother nodded in agreement, she felt the last thread snap. She had packed a small trunk, hitched her old palomino to the wagon, and left before dawn. Now, dust streaked her cheeks, wind tangled her dark hair, and her arms ached from holding the reins. Her body was solid, sure, rounded and full just like her mother's had been, but now it felt like a mark of disgrace, burned into her skin by her own family. The wagon will hit a rut and jerked violently. She let out a sharp gasp. The old mare stumbled, whinnied, then stopped altogether, trembling. No, 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 Kallie whispered, climbing down. She tried to calm the mare, but the wagon was tilted badly. A voice called from the ridge behind her. You all right down there? She turned fast, hand on the small pistol at her waist. A man on horseback was coming down the hill, reins loose in one hand, the other raised to show he meant no harm. He wore a weathered hat, sun-washed shirt, and his eyes sharp and steady held something that made her chest pull tight. I said you all right? He asked again, slower this time. Kallie nodded, then shook her head. The wagon stuck. Horse may have pulled something. He dismounted in one smooth movement and walked toward her, dust kicking up around his boots. He was tall, lean but strong across the shoulders, face tanned deep by the sun. A scar stretched from the corner of his jaw to just under his left ear, but it did not subtract from his looks. It made him real. I can take a look, he said. Name's Landon Eaves. Kallie Vaughn, she replied, her voice more tired than she meant. Landon crouched beside the mare, ran his hand gently down her leg, then stood. She's just spooked. Leg's fine. You hit a rut too hard, axles cracked. Kallie's heart sank. Perfect. He looked at her a long moment. Where you headed? Anywhere but where I came from. He did not press, just nodded once. My place is not far. I'll get the horse and whatever you need off this thing. You can ride with me. Kallie hesitated. Why would you help a stranger? Landon gave a shrug. Because you look like you have not had much good luck lately. And because I got room and no one to fill it. She looked at him again. He was not smiling. He was not pitying her. He was offering. All right, she said softly. He packed her trunk and a few supplies into his saddlebags, helped her onto the big bay gelding behind him, and they rode into the falling sun. His homestead lay in a narrow valley tucked between cottonwoods and red rock. The house was small but clean, with a barn and a creek running behind. He helped her down, and when her feet hit the dirt, she swayed. She had not eaten since morning. You need supper, he said, and without asking, went inside. Kallie stood in the golden light, staring at the quiet place that already felt more like home than the Vaughn ranch ever had. Later, she sat at his table, hands wrapped around a chipped mug of coffee. He slid a plate toward her, beans, bread, and a thick slice of ham. She blinked. You sure? He sat across from her. I do not bring folks here unless I mean to treat them like they matter. Tears stung her eyes, and she looked away. They ate in silence. When she finished, he cleared the plates and poured her more coffee. You need a place to stay? He asked finally. Kallie met his eyes. Would it be all right? I would not offer if it weren't. She nodded, then added, I can work, cook, sew, clean. I am not here to take anything for free. Landon leaned forward, elbows on the table. You are not here to prove anything either, Kallie. She blinked again, harder this time. He stood. You take the bed. I will sleep in the barn. There is no need, he cut her off gently. I was raised better than that. She watched him disappear through the door, the sound of his boots fading into the dark. That night, Kallie lay in a real bed for the first time in weeks. She stared at the ceiling, the scent of pine and saddle soap still lingering in the air. Her body ached in all the places it always did, but for once, it did not feel like a curse. The next morning, she found him splitting wood near the barn. She carried out a tin plate of eggs and toast. Landon wiped sweat from his brow. "You cook this? Hope you are not too picky." He took a bite, nodded. "Best thing I have eaten in weeks." Kallie flushed, then turned to go. "Where did you come from?" he asked. She stopped, heart thumping. "Family ranch east of Rawlins. My father runs cattle. Told me I was too fat to be any use to the family name." Landon's jaw tightened. "That man is a fool." Kallie looked down. "He is still my father. Does not mean he is right." She looked up at him. He was watching her again, that same steady way, like he saw something good in her no one else had bothered to look for. "I should get to mending your shirts," she said, voice barely above a whisper. He nodded, but his eyes stayed warm. Over the next week, they settled into an easy rhythm. She cooked and cleaned, patched the roof, even helped him with the horses. He gave her space, but not distance. Every time he looked at her, it was clear he saw her, not her size, not her past. Just her. On the 8th day, a storm rolled in. Rain hammered the roof, wind screaming through the valley. The barn door slammed open, and Landon rushed out to fix it. Kallie ran after him. "Let me help." They fought the wind together, soaked through, laughing by the time the latch held. Inside, breathless and dripping, he looked at her. "You are something fierce, Kallie Vaughn." She shook her head but smiled. "You are the first man who ever said that like it was a good thing." "It is." The air went still. Landon stepped closer. "You are not too much. You are just enough." Kallie's breath caught. He reached up, brushed wet hair from her face. "I would like to keep you here, if you want to stay." She nodded, heart pounding. "I do." He leaned in and kissed her, soft at first, then deeper. When he pulled back, she was shaking. "You all right?" he asked. She nodded. "I have just never been kissed like that before." "Then I am glad I was the first." They stood in the barn, wind howling outside, the world falling away. And for the first time in her life, Kallie felt wanted, not in spite of who she was, but because of it. By late May, the land around them softened. The last of the snowmelt fed the creek behind the house, and green pushed up through the earth, tentative but steady. Kallie had taken to walking the fence line in the mornings, her apron pocket full of nails and a small hammer, checking for breaks. The rhythm of it soothed her in ways she hadn't expected. Quiet work, honest and needed. Landon found her near the north post one morning, sleeves rolled, hair pinned in a loose coil. He didn't speak right away, just leaned his arms on the top rail and watched her finish repairing a splintered board. "You steady your hand better than some men I've hired," he said finally. She wiped her brow and looked over. "I had to learn. My father never believed in paying help, so we all worked the land. You miss it." His voice held no judgment, only curiosity. She rested the hammer on her thigh and thought a moment before answering. "No. I miss my mother's garden. I miss the smell of molasses cookies cooling on the sill. But no, I don't miss the rest." Landon nodded, gaze drifting to the wide stretch of prairie. "There's seed in the barn. I meant to plant a little patch near the porch. You want it, it's yours." She blinked, caught off guard. "You'd let me? It's your home too, if you want it to be." The words settled low in her chest, warm and certain. She didn't answer right away, but she reached out, laid her hand over his where it rested on the fence. He didn't move, didn't flinch, just let her touch him. That night, she knelt in the dirt with a lantern beside her, fingers pressing seeds into the fresh soil. Landon sat on the porch steps, a whittling knife in hand, shaping a piece of cedar into something she couldn't yet make out. The quiet wasn't heavy between them. It was full of things unsaid but understood. "You ever think about marriage?" she asked without looking up. The knife paused mid-cut. "Sometimes." She glanced at him. "I don't mean in general. I mean you. Do you think about it?" He looked at the carving in his hand, then at her. "I never saw the point of marrying just to have someone around. But I'd do it for the right woman. The one who fits." Kallie brushed soil from her palm. And what would she be like? He didn't answer right away. The wind stirred the tall grass. A coyote called in the distance. She'd be strong in the ways that matter. Not afraid of silence. Not afraid of wanting more. Callie's throat tightened. I used to think no man would ever see me that way. I'm not any man. She stood slowly, lantern in hand. No, you're not. She went inside, heart thrumming like a hummingbird's wings. That night, she found the cedar carving on the table. A small horse, delicate and smooth, with her initials carefully etched beneath the saddle. The next morning, she didn't walk the fence. Instead, she waited until Landon returned from checking the cattle. He was brushing dust from his sleeves when she stepped out onto the porch. I want to stay, she said. Not just for now. I want to make this my life. He looked at her, long and steady. Then it's yours. She stepped down, cross to him. But I don't want to be just a helper. I want to be your wife. He reached for her hand, calloused fingers folding over hers. I was hoping you'd say that. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. I never imagined I'd be wanted for all of me, not just the parts someone could use. He touched her cheek, thumb grazing the line of her jaw. I don't want a piece of you, Kallie. I want the whole woman who walks fences, plants seeds, and holds her head high even when the world tries to bow it. She swallowed hard, then smiled. You'll have her. They married at the end of the week, just the two of them and a circuit preacher who passed through with a mule and a Bible. Kallie wore a pale blue dress she'd sewn from scrap fabric, and Landon offered her a simple silver ring he'd traded for in town the day before. He hadn't told her, just left it on the pillow with a sprig of wild sage. That night, as the wind settled and the stars blinked out one by one, she lay beside him, their hands clasped beneath the quilt. You ever think the land remembers people? She whispered. He turned his head toward her in the dark. I think it remembers kindness, and pain, and love. She pressed her face to his shoulder. Then I hope it remembers us. It will, he said, because we're not leaving. And in that quiet, with nothing but the sound of the creek and the slow beat of his heart under her palm, Kallie finally believed she belonged. By early June, the soil around the porch had begun to hold the scent of growing things. Kallie bent over her garden in the morning light, her skirt brushing against the soft earth. Sprouts had taken hold, beans, carrots, a row of onions, and the marigolds she'd planted along the border were starting to open, bright against the dull clapboard of the house. Landon came back from the ridge with his hat in hand and sun in his hair. Snowmelt pushed the river higher than usual, he said, stepping around the garden edge. We'll need to shore up the eastern fence before it starts cutting through. I can help, she said, wiping her palms on her apron. He looked at her hands. You've got dirt under every nail. My mother used to say that meant you were doing something worthwhile. He crouched beside her, brushing a stray leaf. She sounds like someone I'd have liked. You'd have had to earn her favor. She didn't take to men quick. I'd have tried, he said, quiet and plain. She smiled, but her eyes slid toward the horizon. I keep wondering if they've noticed I'm gone. You want them to? She hesitated, then shook her head. Not anymore. He stood and offered his hand. Help me with the fence? They walked the cattle trail together, the heat rising off the ground in waves. The floodplain near the river had softened to thick mud, and the eastern posts leaned uncertainly in the wet earth. Landon pulled off his boots and stepped in. Won't get far unless we brace from the dry side. Kallie held the post steady while he worked the brace into place, her boots sinking slightly with each shift of weight. When they finished, she wiped her brow with the back of her sleeve and looked over the land. You ever think about what this place looked like before anyone built fences on it? She asked. I think about it more than I say. She turned toward him. Sometimes I feel like I'm trespassing. Like I just showed up and claimed something that doesn't belong to me. He looked past her toward the cottonwoods. A man I rode with once said the land isn't something you own. It's something you borrow, and if you care for it right, it lets you stay. I like that. I knew you would. They walked back slow, the light shifting gold across the field. That evening, while Landon repaired a leather strap on one of the harnesses, Kallie sat at the table with a pencil and a scrap of paper. She pressed the tip to the page, hesitated, then began to draw. He glanced over. "That a map?" "Sort of. I was thinking of how to make the garden bigger come fall. Maybe some squash, potatoes. You've got the space." He leaned his arms against the table. "You're already thinking about next season." "I guess I am. You think this is yours now?" She set the pencil down. "I think I want it to be. If you'll have me in it." "I married you, Kallie." "That wasn't just for the season." She looked down, then up again. "Sometimes I still wait for it to fall apart. For you to change your mind." "I won't." She touched the edge of his hand. "I don't know how to stop bracing for it." "You don't have to stop yet. Just let me be here while you learn." The circle of their joined hands rested on the table, quiet and steady. That night, she stood at the window while Landon finished banking the fire. Outside, fireflies lit the edge of the field. She felt his arms come around her from behind, and she leaned back against his chest. "There's a dance in town next month," he said, his voice low against her ear. "I haven't been to one since I was 16. Would you go with me?" She turned slightly, enough to see his face. "You want to take your wife dancing?" "I want to take the woman I love dancing." She drew in a breath. "Then you'd better teach me how to waltz, because I never learned." He held out his hand. "Now's as good a time as any." They moved the table back, and he taught her slow, counting steps under his breath, her bare feet brushing the floorboards. She stumbled once, laughed, then found her rhythm. He didn't lead with force, only steadiness, only patience. When the lantern burned low, they stopped, and she rested her head against his shoulder. "You make me feel like I belong in my own skin," she whispered. "You always have. You just needed someone to remind you." Outside, the wind shifted through the grass. Inside, their hands stayed joined, the warmth between them solid as the land they stood on. The first Sunday of July arrived with the scent of sage on the wind and a sky so wide and blue it made Kallie's chest ache to look at it too long. She stood on the porch, tying her hair back with a strip of muslin, watching Landon saddle the horses. He'd spent the morning oiling the leather tack and talking about the high pasture, where a few of his yearlings had wandered up after the last storm. "Won't be back before sundown," he said, tightening the girth strap. "You all right being here alone that long?" She pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders. "You've got a good dog. I've got the shotgun. I'll be fine." Landon stepped to the edge of the porch and looked at her a long moment. "You sure?" "I'm sure," she said. "But there's one thing I want before you go." He tilted his head. "Name it." She walked down the steps, took his hand, and pressed it to her waist. "When you get back, I want to talk about building a room on the east side." His brow lifted. "What for?" She looked down, then back at him. "For growing into. For what might come." He understood. She saw it in the way his breath caught just once. He nodded. "I'll build it." By the time his horse disappeared over the ridge, she'd set to work washing linens. The breeze carried the sound of the creek, stronger now from last week's rain, and the cottonwood swayed with a soft rustle. She hung the sheets on the line, then moved inside to sort the bolts of fabric she'd been piecing for a quilt. As the sun climbed, a knock came at the door. Not hurried, but firm. She paused near the hearth, heart thudding. No one came this far unless they'd meant to. She opened the door slowly. A woman stood there, middle-aged, with a sun-worn face and a wide-brimmed straw hat pulled low. Dust clung to the hem of her skirt. Her hands rested on the hips of a faded riding jacket. "I'm looking for Landon Eaves," she said. Kallie stepped outside, closing the door behind her. "He's gone to the pasture. Won't be back till evening." The woman looked her over. "You his wife?" "I am." "Who are you?" The woman didn't flinch. "My name's Ruth Morrow. I used to know Landon. Long time ago." Kallie folded her arms. "That's so. He wrote to my son when he got back from the war. Said he was settling here. I wasn't sure if he was still alive, to tell you the truth." Kallie studied her. "You came all this way to check?" "I came because my boy didn't come back. and Landon was the last person who saw him alive. Kallie stepped aside. You want to wait inside? I'd rather wait by the fence, Ruth said. Don't want to crowd you. Kallie nodded. I'll bring you some water. By the time Landon returned, the sun was low and the horses were slick with sweat. He dismounted and tied the reins, then turned toward the house. When he saw Ruth near the fence, his stride slowed. He walked to her without a word. Kallie watched from the porch, a basin of peas in her lap. You came, he said. I had to, Ruth answered. It's been years, and I still don't know what happened. He looked down at his hands. We were near Antelope Creek. Ambush. I tried to get to him. Couldn't. I figured as much, she said. But I needed to hear it. I buried him myself. Marked it with a stone. Ruth's eyes shone, but she didn't cry. That's more than most mothers get. Thank you. He nodded. You want to stay for supper? She shook her head. No. I said what I came to say. She turned, then hesitated. You've built something here. I have. She looked toward the porch where Kallie sat quietly. She's strong. I can see that. I know. After Ruth rode off, Landon joined Kallie on the steps. She passed him a mug of water. He drank slowly, then set it down. I didn't know she was still alive. She needed to see you. He leaned back, elbows on his knees. I thought about telling you. About the boy. You just did. Her voice was soft, not accusing. I carried him over 2 ridges. Wasn't even 20. I've never stopped hearing his breath in my ear. Kallie laid a hand on his back. You don't have to carry it alone. He looked over at her. That's the thing, Kallie. With you here, it doesn't feel like I am anymore. They sat without speaking after that, the air thick with the scent of warm earth and honeysuckle. When the last light faded from the sky, he reached for her hand. I want to start the addition tomorrow. If you're sure. I've never been more sure of anything. That night, she lay beside him, feeling the solid weight of his arm across her waist and something deeper anchoring her than she'd ever known. No longer bracing for the world to take it away, she simply let the peace settle in. The new room took shape slowly, each board nailed into place with care. Landon built it with his sleeves rolled, sawdust clinging to his arms, and Kallie handed him tools without needing to ask what came next. They worked in tandem, never rushing, never wasting movement. She kept a small notebook tucked into her apron where she made quiet notes about what would go where. Once the walls were sealed, she pictured a rocking chair beside the window, a woven rug on the floor, and shelves for what they would need come winter. By the second week, the walls stood and the roof beams spanned across like outstretched arms. Kallie climbed the ladder to hold the final crossbeam while Landon hammered it into place. You ever build a room just for hope before? She asked, voice steady despite the height. He didn't look at her right away. Never had a reason to. She watched the way his hands moved, sure, deliberate. You do now. I know. They finished as the sun dipped low, and the wind picked up, cooling the sweat at their necks. Landon stood back to study the frame, then reached for her hand without saying anything. She laced her fingers through his, and they stood together, looking toward what would soon be a quiet space filled with more than just walls. Later that night, she spread out the worn quilt squares she'd been piecing together by lamplight. Landon leaned against the doorframe of the bedroom, watching her fingers match corners. That for the new bed? She nodded, not looking up. I've been saving scraps. Thought I might not have a reason to finish it. But it's time. He stepped closer. You've got a good eye for color. You've got a good eye for what holds. He sat beside her, carefully picking up a square with a faded embroidery of a bird stitched into the corner. This one yours? My mother's. From the hem of one of her old Sunday dresses. He turned it over in his hands, then laid it down gently. She'd be proud of what you're building here. I hope so. She paused, then added, I never told you, but she used to hum when she needed bread. Always the same melody. I haven't heard it in years, but I caught myself humming it last week. He leaned in, his voice low. Then she's still with you, just different now. In the weeks that followed, Kallie's steps slowed. She sat more often in the afternoon, hand resting over the curve of her stomach, as if instinctively protecting something still fragile. Landon never asked questions she didn't offer answers to, but he built a bench beneath the cottonwood tree where she liked to sit with her sewing and carved a small wooden box for the keepsakes she'd begun to collect. One evening, as the dusk settled warm over the valley, she called him out to the porch. He came from the barn, wiping his hands on a rag. "Something wrong?" She shook her head, then held up a folded slip of paper. "The circuit preacher's passing through again next week. I sent word." Landon took the note. "You want a blessing?" "I want the child to be born into something rooted. Not just the two of us saying it's enough, I want it carved into the world." He folded the note and tucked it into his pocket. "Then we'll do it right. Whatever you need." She reached for him, fingers curling into the fabric of his shirt. "I've never needed anything more than I need this life we've made." He kissed her without words, the kind of kiss that didn't ask for more than what already was. When they pulled apart, she rested her forehead to his. "I don't know if I'll be a good mother. You'll be the only one I'd trust to raise what we bring into this world." The preacher came at dawn 4 days later, dust on his coat and Bible in hand. They stood beneath the cottonwood, the new room framed behind them, and spoke vows again, not to each other this time, but to the life growing quietly between them. Afterward, Kallie placed her hand on the worn bark of the tree trunk. "This is where we began," she said, looking at Landon. "I want this to be where we grow. We already are." That fall, the room filled with light through the east-facing window. Kallie stitched the final quilt square in a rocking chair just as the first frost touched the grass. She went into labor 2 days later, and Landon never left her side. When the baby came a dark-haired girl with strong lungs and wide eyes, he wrapped her gently and set her in Kallie's arms with a reverence he hadn't known he was capable of. They named her May, after the month the land turned soft and forgiving. Landon built a cradle by hand, sanded smooth and lined with the quilt Kallie had finished only hours before her pains began. He placed it beneath the window where the morning sun warmed the wood. On the first day May slept through the night, Kallie stood in the doorway of the room they had built together and watched her daughter breathe. Landon came up behind her, his hands settling around her waist. "She's got your eyes," he said softly. "And your quiet. She'll have your strength." They stayed like that for a long time, the house silent except for the creak of the floorboards under their bare feet and the soft wind whispering through the eaves. Kallie turned toward him at last. "I thought I'd never be seen for who I really was, let alone loved for it." "You weren't meant to be hidden," he said. "You were meant to be held." And she was. Every day from then on. The seasons turned. May learned to walk, then talk, her small voice filling the rooms with laughter. Kallie taught her to plant seeds in spring and gather herbs before the frost. Landon showed her how to saddle a pony, how to listen to the wind before it changed. They filled the house with music, with quiet dinners, with the soft thrum of a life earned inch by inch. And in the evenings, when the fields glowed gold and the shadows stretched long across the porch, Kallie and Landon sat side by side, hands entwined, hearts steady. Not waiting for the world to take it, but living in it fully, every breath a promise kept.